What happens when one of Hollywood's most unpredictable actors sits down for what should be a routine morning show interview, only to have the host challenge him on his most controversial statements? The answer is television gold and complete chaos. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this story gets absolutely wild. Charlie Sheen walked onto the Good Morning America set with the kind of swagger that only comes from years of living in the spotlight. The studio lights caught his familiar smirk as he settled into the interview chair across from Michael Strahan, who was shuffling through his notes with the practiced ease of a seasoned broadcaster. "Charlie Sheen, welcome back to Good Morning America," Strahan began, his voice carrying that warm television host tone. "Always a pleasure to have you here, Michael. Always good to be here, man." "Thanks for having me," Charlie replied, leaning back in his chair with casual confidence. "So, let's dive right in. You've been making headlines recently with some pretty strong statements about the entertainment industry. You called Hollywood, and I quote, a cesspool of fake relationships and manufactured drama. That's pretty harsh coming from someone who's been such a big part of it." Charlie's expression shifted slightly, his smile becoming more calculated. "Well, Michael, I've been in this business for over 3 decades. I think I've earned the right to call it like I see it. When you've been on the inside as long as I have, you start to see through the veneer. But don't you think that's a bit hypocritical? I mean, you've certainly contributed to your fair share of drama over the years. The very public meltdowns, the controversial interviews, the tiger blood comments. Weren't those just as manufactured for attention?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and viewers could practically see Charlie's demeanor change. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and his fingers drummed once against the arm of his chair. "You know what, Michael? I think there's a big difference between being authentic about your struggles and creating fake controversies for publicity. Everything I went through, every mistake I made, that was real. That was my life, not some publicity stunt cooked up by a team of executives. But surely you can see how some people might view your behavior during that time as attention-seeking. The interviews where you talked about winning, about having tiger blood, about being a warlock. Come on, Charlie. That wasn't exactly subtle." Charlie leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "Those weren't performances, Michael. That was me dealing with addiction, with mental health issues, with the pressure of this industry in the only way I knew how at the time. And frankly, I'm a little surprised that you're sitting here trying to psychoanalyze me when we're supposed to be talking about my new projects." Strahan didn't back down, maintaining his professional composure, but pressing forward. "I think our viewers are interested in understanding the real Charlie Sheen. You've been clean and sober for years now. You've rebuilt relationships with your family. You're working again. But you're also making these sweeping statements about an industry that gave you incredible opportunities. Help us understand that contradiction." "There's no contradiction, Michael. The industry gave me opportunities, sure, but it also chewed me up and spit me out when I was at my lowest point. It celebrated my dysfunction when it was profitable and discarded me when it wasn't. That's not gratitude talking, that's experience." "But Charlie, with respect, weren't many of those problems self-inflicted? The substance abuse, the conflicts with producers, the very public feuds. At what point do you take responsibility for your own actions instead of blaming the system?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Charlie's casual demeanor evaporated entirely, replaced by something much more intense. His voice remained controlled, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "Now, self-inflicted, Michael. Let me tell you something about self-inflicted. Self-inflicted is when you choose to do drugs at a party. What happened to me was systematic enablement by an industry that profits from people's pain. They handed me scripts that required me to work 18-hour days while I was dealing with addiction. They surrounded me with people who fed my worst impulses because it made good television. They turned my personal struggles into content for entertainment shows. So don't sit there and lecture me about self-inflicted wounds when you're part of the same machine." Strahan's eyebrows raised slightly at the intensity of the response, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "I understand you feel the industry let you down, but surely you recognize that many people tried to help you during that time. Your co-stars, your family, even some executives expressed concern. Some did. You're right, and I'm grateful to those people. But for every person who genuinely tried to help, there were 5 others who were more interested in the spectacle. They wanted Charlie Sheen the walking disaster, not Charlie Sheen, the human being who needed support. So when you make these statements about Hollywood being fake, you're speaking from that experience. I'm speaking from the experience of being treated like a commodity instead of a person, of having my lowest moments broadcast for entertainment, of watching people pretend to care about my well-being while they were really just protecting their investment. The interview was beginning to feel less like a promotional appearance and more like a confrontation. Both men were leaning forward, now the casual morning show atmosphere replaced by something much more charged. Strahan sensed he had struck a nerve, but instead of backing off, he decided to push deeper. Charlie, I want to pivot to something specific. Last month, you gave an interview where you said that morning shows like this one are just as guilty of exploiting people's personal lives for ratings. You're sitting here right now on a morning show. How do we square that circle? Charlie's laugh was sharp and humorless. Well, Michael, I guess we're about to find out, aren't we? Because right now you're proving my point. We're supposed to be here talking about my upcoming film, my charity work, my recovery journey. Instead, you're digging into my past trauma for content. This is exactly what I was talking about. But Charlie, your past is part of your story, your recovery, your growth. That's inspiring to people. Surely, you can see the difference between exploitation and genuine interest in your journey. Genuine interest. Charlie's voice rose slightly, though he quickly brought back under control. Michael, let me ask you something. How many times have you interviewed me over the years? How many of those interviews were about my work? And how many were about my personal problems? Strahan paused, clearly doing mental math. I think we've always tried to balance both aspects of your career and life. That's not an answer. That's corporate speak. The honest answer is that every single time I've sat in chairs like this one, the conversation always comes back to the same thing. My addiction, my breakdown, my mistakes. Never about 2.5 Men being one of the most successful sitcoms in television history. Never about my work in films like Platoon or Wall Street. Always about the spectacle. Those shows and movies are certainly important parts of your legacy. But you have to admit that your public struggles have been a significant part of your story. People connect with redemption narratives, with stories of overcoming adversity. Charlie stood up abruptly from his chair, causing a visible stir among the crew. He didn't leave, but he was no longer seated, instead pacing the small area behind his chair. There it is again. Redemption narrative. Overcoming adversity. These aren't just buzzwords, Michael. This is my actual life you're talking about. I didn't go through hell so that you could package it into an inspiring story for your morning audience. I went through hell because I was sick. And instead of getting help, I got cameras pointed at me. The studio had gone completely quiet except for Charlie's voice and the soft hum of equipment. Even the crew members who were usually moving around had stopped to watch. Strahan maintained his composure, though his tone became more measured. Charlie, I understand this is emotional for you, but I think you're being unfair. Many of the interviews you gave during that time, you initiated. You called reporters, you went on shows, you made statements. Nobody forced you to do those interviews. You think I was in a position to make rational decisions about media appearances when I was using cocaine and drinking heavily? You think that was informed consent? Michael, that's like interviewing someone who's having a psychotic break and then saying they chose to participate. But you were a grown man making your own choices. At some point, personal responsibility has to factor into this equation. Charlie stopped pacing and turned to face Strahan directly. Personal responsibility, right? Tell me, Michael, when you were struggling with your divorce, when you were dealing with personal issues, did entertainment reporters camp outside your house? Did they analyze every statement you made for signs of instability? Did they turn your pain into punchlines? That's different, Charlie. I wasn't a major television star with a $100 million contract making public statements about tiger blood and winning. Different how? Because I was more famous. Because I was sicker. Because I was more entertaining in my dysfunction. You're literally proving my point right now. You're saying it was okay to exploit me because I was a bigger target. Strahan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I'm not saying it was okay to exploit anyone. I'm saying that public figures have to accept a certain level of scrutiny that comes with the territory. Scrutiny, sure, but what happened to me wasn't scrutiny. It was a feeding frenzy. And shows like this one were right there with the rest of them, turning my mental health crisis into entertainment content. The fact that you can't see the difference is exactly the problem. The tension in the studio was palpable. Now, what had started as a standard celebrity interview had transformed into something much more confrontational and personal. Charlie, I think you're painting with a very broad brush here. Not everyone in this business is out to exploit people. There are journalists and hosts who genuinely care about telling important stories. Maybe there are, but they're vastly outnumbered by the ones who care more about ratings than humanity. And the system itself, the way it's structured, it rewards the exploitation. The more dramatic the story, the better the ratings, the more personal the revelation, the more viral the clip becomes. You know this, Michael. You've been in this business long enough to know exactly how it works. So, what would you prefer? That we never talk about addiction, about mental health, about recovery. These are important topics that help people. I'd prefer that you talk about them with actual experts instead of using 6 celebrities as your case studies. I'd prefer that you wait until someone is healthy before you ask them to dissect their trauma for your audience. I'd prefer that you treat people's pain like pain instead of content. Strahan was clearly trying to regain control of the interview. I hear what you're saying, Charlie, and I think these are valid concerns about the industry as a whole. But right now you're here, you're healthy, you're successful again. Doesn't that prove the system can work? Charlie's face flushed with visible anger at that question. The system worked, Michael. Are you listening to yourself right now? I'm healthy despite the system, not because of it. I got clean when I finally got away from all of this. When I stopped doing interviews like this one. When I stepped back from the machine that was grinding me up. But you're here now doing an interview. You're promoting projects. You're engaging with the media again. That suggests you found a way to make it work for you. I'm here because my publicist told me I had to be here if I wanted people to see my new film. I'm here because even when you try to step away from this circus, they tell you that you can't have a career without feeding the beast. So here I am feeding the beast again and proving my own point about how impossible it is to escape this cycle. Straw leaned back slightly, his tone becoming more defensive. Charlie, I think you're being extremely unfair to characterize what we do here as feeding the beast. We're having a conversation. We're giving you a platform to share your perspective. Isn't that exactly what you want? What I want is to talk about my work without having to relitigate my entire personal history every single time. What I want is to be treated like a human being instead of a cautionary tale. What I want is for someone in this industry to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe we could have handled things differently when I was at my worst. And I think many people in the industry would acknowledge that there's been a lot of growth in how we approach mental health and addiction stories. There's more awareness now about the responsibility that comes with this platform. Charlie laughed bitterly. More awareness. Michael, yesterday I saw a morning show doing a segment about a young actor's struggle with anxiety, complete with hidden camera footage and expert analysis of his social media posts. Yesterday. This conversation we're having right now proves that nothing has changed. That's not fair, Charlie. Every situation is different. Every story is different. Is it? Or do you just tell yourself that to sleep better at night? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly the same. Find someone who's struggling. Get them in a chair. Ask them uncomfortable questions about their worst moments. Package it as human interest, profit from the clicks and views. The studio atmosphere had become incredibly tense. Several crew members were exchanging glances, and even Strahan seemed to be losing some of his professional composure. You know what, Charlie? I think you're projecting a lot of your own unresolved anger onto this conversation. We invited you here with respect. We're treating you with dignity, and you're attacking not just me personally, but everyone who works on this show. Charlie's eyes flashed dangerously, projecting unresolved anger. And there it is, Michael. The amateur psychology. Now you're diagnosing me on live television. Do you have a degree in psychiatry that I'm not aware of? Or are you just another talk show host who thinks he can analyze people's mental health for entertainment? I'm not diagnosing anyone. I'm observing that you seem very angry about experiences that happened years ago. And you're directing that anger at people who are trying to have a respectful conversation with you right now. Respectful. You call this respectful? You've spent the last 20 minutes trying to get me to admit that my addiction was my fault, that the media coverage was justified, that I should be grateful for the opportunity to be exploited. How exactly is that respectful? That's not what I've been trying to do at all. I've been trying to understand your perspective, while also challenging some of your broader statements about the industry. Challenging my statements. Michael, let me tell you what challenging would actually look like. Challenging would be asking the hard questions about why entertainment media profits from people's suffering. Challenging would be examining your own role in perpetuating these cycles. Challenging would be having this conversation when the cameras aren't rolling instead of performing your concern for your audience. Strahan's professional mask was beginning to slip. Charlie, I think you're being incredibly unfair. I've been nothing but professional with you today. I've given you a platform to share your views. I've listened to your concerns. And frankly, I think you're turning this into something it doesn't need to be. Professional. You call it professional to ambush a guest with questions about their mental health crisis. You call it professional to turn someone's recovery into content. Michael, if this is your definition of professional, then maybe that's exactly the problem I'm talking about. Nobody ambushed you, Charlie. These are standard questions for someone who's been as public about their struggles as you have been. Standard questions, right? Because I've been public about my struggles, that means they're fair game forever. Because I was sick in public, that means I owe everyone an explanation for the rest of my life. Because I made mistakes when I was using drugs, that means every conversation I have has to circle back to those mistakes. The conversation had completely spiraled beyond what anyone in the studio had expected. What was supposed to be a routine promotional interview had become a heated debate about media ethics, personal responsibility, and the treatment of celebrities in crisis. Charlie, I think we need to take a step back here. This conversation has gotten very heated, and I don't think that's serving anyone well. You're absolutely right, Michael. This conversation isn't serving anyone well. It's not serving me. It's not serving your viewers. And honestly, it's not serving you either, because instead of having a meaningful discussion about any of the topics we could have covered, we've spent our time relitigating my past, because that's what sells. That's what gets clicks. That's what this industry has trained everyone to expect. Strahan tried one last time to salvage the interview. His voice strained, but still attempting professionalism. Charlie, look. We clearly have different perspectives on this, but you're here. You have a new project. You have things you want to share with people. Can we refocus on that? Charlie shook his head slowly, a look of resigned frustration crossing his face. You still don't get it, do you? This is exactly what I mean. Even now, after everything I've just explained to you, your instinct is to try to steer this back to the promotional content to get the sound bite you need for your show. You're literally doing the thing I'm criticizing while I'm criticizing it. I'm trying to give you the opportunity to talk about your work, which is why you said you came here in the first place. No, Michael, you're trying to salvage this interview because it's gone off the rails from your predetermined narrative. You had your talking points, your scripted questions, your neat little segment planned out. Celebrity comes on, talks about their past struggles, shows they've learned and grown, promotes their project. Everyone feels good about the redemption story, but real life is messier than your rundown, isn't it? The studio was dead silent now. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place, unsure whether they should keep recording or cut away. Charlie, I think you're reading way too much into this. We're just trying to have a conversation. A conversation? Michael, conversations happen between equals. This isn't a conversation. It's an interrogation disguised as an interview. You have all the power here. You control the questions. You control the narrative. You control how this gets edited and presented to your audience. I'm just here to dance for your cameras. Strahan's patience finally snapped, and his voice took on a sharper edge. You know what, Charlie? Maybe you're right. Maybe this was a mistake. Because I thought we were talking to someone who had grown and learned from their experiences. But it seems like you're still the same person who blames everyone else for their problems. The words hung in the air like a slap. Charlie went completely still, his face cycling through a range of emotions before settling on something that looked like sad vindication. And there it is, Charlie said quietly, his voice now eerily calm. The real Michael Strahan. When you can't get what you want from your guest, when they won't play along with your script, you attack them personally. You just proved every single point I've been making for the last half hour. I didn't attack you. I just pointed out that you seem to have a pattern of blaming others instead of taking responsibility. You just called me the same person who blames everyone else for their problems on live television to an audience of millions. How is that not an attack? How is that professional journalism? How is that treating me with dignity and respect? Strahan realized he had crossed a line, but it was too late to take it back. Charlie, maybe that came out wrong. No, Michael, it came out exactly right. It came out honest. For the first time in this entire interview, you said what you actually think instead of hiding behind your professional persona. And what you actually think is that I'm a washed-up actor who can't take responsibility for his own life. Charlie started, moving toward the edge of the set. But he wasn't done talking. You know what's funny? I came here today thinking maybe things had changed. Maybe I was wrong about this industry. Maybe people like you had learned something from watching people like me get destroyed for your entertainment. Charlie, please don't leave like this. Let's finish the conversation. Finish the conversation? Michael, you just finished it for both of us. You showed your true colors. And honestly, I'm grateful because now I don't have to wonder anymore whether this industry has changed. I don't have to hope that maybe this time will be different. Strahan stood up from his chair, clearly flustered. This is ridiculous, Charlie. You're storming off because I challenged you on your victim mentality. Victim mentality? Charlie stopped walking and turned back to face the host. Michael, let me tell you something about victim mentality. Victim mentality is when you refuse to acknowledge that you've been hurt. What I have is survivor clarity. I can see this system for exactly what it is, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make you comfortable. So that's it? You're just going to walk away. I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to stop participating in my own exploitation. I'm going to stop feeding a machine that profits from human suffering. And I'm going to stop pretending that people like you are interested in anything other than ratings, Charlie began, removing his microphone as he spoke, his movements deliberate and final. You want to know what responsibility looks like, Michael? This is it. Taking responsibility means recognizing when you're in a toxic situation and removing yourself from it. Taking responsibility means not allowing people to profit from your pain. Taking responsibility means saying no. Charlie, come on. Don't do this. We can work this out. Work what out? You've already made it clear what you think of me. You've already shown your audience exactly who you are when the mask slips. There's nothing left to work out. As Charlie reached the edge of the set, he turned back one final time. You know what the saddest part is, Michael? You probably think you won this exchange. You probably think you exposed me as unstable or difficult. But what you actually did was prove that everything I said about this industry is true. You couldn't help yourself. Even when I was telling you exactly what the problem was, you had to become part of it. With that, Charlie Sheen walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving Michael Strahan standing alone, visibly shaken as the cameras continued to roll. The studio remained in stunned silence, everyone processing what they had just witnessed. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 minutes, but it had completely derailed what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview, turning it into a raw, unfiltered glimpse at the darker side of celebrity culture and media exploitation. And that's exactly how one of Hollywood's most unpredictable stars reminded everyone why you should never underestimate the power of someone who has nothing left to lose. What did you think about Charlie's decision to walk off? Was he justified, or did he take things too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.